Israel reopens Gaza's Rafah border crossing to Egypt with tight limits. UK expels Russian diplomat in tit-for-tat over spying accusations. Trump hopeful of Iran deal after Tehran warns of regional war. World should be alarmed if New START treaty expires. WHO chief says turmoil creates chance for reset. Israel has partially reopened the Rafah crossing on Monday, allowing a limited number of Palestinians to enter and leave Gaza Strip on foot for the first time in months. The crossing, Gaza's main gateway to the outside world for its more than 2 million residents, had been largely closed throughout the war. Its reopening is one of the final steps required under the initial phase of a US-brokered ceasefire, reached in October under Donald Trump. Palestinian officials said around 50 people were expected to enter Gaza on the first day, while a similar number would be allowed to leave, subject to strict Israeli security screening. Those entering include Palestinians who fled Gaza earlier in the war and are now returning for the first time. An Israeli security official confirmed that the crossing was open for both entry and exit. Israel seized control of the Rafah crossing in May 2024, roughly 9 months into the conflict. Under the ceasefire framework, reopening Rafah is seen as a confidence-building measure ahead of a second phase of talks, which Trump announced in January, aimed at addressing Gaza's future governance and reconstruction. Britain has expelled a Russian diplomat in a reciprocal move after Russia last month expelled a British diplomat, accusing them of espionage. The UK Foreign Office said on Monday that Russia's allegations were baseless and described Moscow's action as unprovoked and unjustified. A senior British official summoned Russia's ambassador to London and informed him that the UK would not tolerate what it called intimidation of British embassy staff. As a result, Britain has revoked the accreditation of one Russian diplomat. Relations between Russia and Western countries, including United Kingdom, have sharply deteriorated since the war in Ukraine began. Both sides have repeatedly accused each other of espionage activities, with diplomats reporting increased surveillance and pressure. Britain warned that any further actions by Russia against its diplomats would be viewed as an escalation and would be met with a response. The Russian embassy in London did not immediately comment on the British decision. US President Donald Trump said on Sunday he remained hopeful of reaching a deal with Iran, despite warnings from Iran's leadership that a US attack would spark a regional war. Tensions have escalated after Iran's security forces carried out a deadly crackdown on anti-government protests that peaked last month. In response, Trump has threatened military action and ordered an aircraft carrier strike group to the Middle East. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, described the protests as a foreign-backed coup and warned that any US military strike would trigger a wider regional conflict. He told Iranians not to be intimidated by Washington's threats. Asked about Khamenei's remarks, Trump said he still hoped diplomacy would succeed. "Hopefully we'll make a deal," he told reporters, adding that failure to do so would test Iran's warnings. The protests began over rising living costs before turning into a broader anti-government movement. Iranian authorities have accused the United States and Israel of fueling the unrest. Amid the standoff, Iran released a 26-year-old protester, Irfan Soltani, on bail after Washington warned he faced execution. Tehran said Soltani had never been sentenced to death and that his charges did not carry the death penalty. Russia has warned that the expiration of the New START treaty without a replacement would leave the world's largest nuclear powers without limits for the first time since the early 1970s. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, said the situation should alarm the international community, even if it does not immediately lead to nuclear war. The New START treaty, signed in 2010 by then US President Barack Obama and Medvedev when he was Russia's president, caps deployed strategic nuclear warheads at 550 for both Russia and the United States. The agreement is due to expire on February 5. Russian officials say Moscow has proposed extending existing limits for one more year but has not received an official response from Washington. Medvedev said arms control treaties are critical not only for limiting weapons but also for verifying intentions and maintaining a minimum level of trust between nuclear powers. In January, US President Donald Trump signaled he was prepared to let the treaty lapse, saying a new and better agreement could be negotiated. The head of the World Health Organization said on Monday that sharp funding cuts in 2025, driven largely by the withdrawal of the United States, have created an opportunity to build a leaner and more focused organization. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus told the agency's annual executive board meeting that 2025 had been one of the most difficult years in the organization's history, as major donors reduced spending. The United States, traditionally the WHO's largest donor, cut foreign aid under President Donald Trump, who formally notified the WHO of Washington's withdrawal on his first day back in office in January 2025. Tedros said the loss of funding forced the WHO to reduce its workforce, with more than 1,000 staff leaving the organization. However, he said the shock accelerated reforms that were already underway to reduce reliance on a small number of major donors. He said the WHO has now largely completed a process of prioritization and realignment, and has reached a position of stability.